Let's try building a form for entry of custom virtual pets. We already have all of the form controls created. We just need to add the form. We are back in VS Code with the Pet Cafe folder open, looking again at the pet-create.html file we've been working on. We want to add a form element around all of the controls we created earlier. So here, above the pet's name, we add the form element. VS Code added our form closing tag. We cut that tag, scroll down to the bottom of our document, and paste it just after the button. Use Shift-Alt-F or Shift-Option-F on the Mac to reformat and indent the controls within the form. Scrolling back to the opening form tag, we'll set the form attributes, starting with the action. What do we type here for the action attribute? Since we don't have a backend server to submit our form to, we'll leave it as an empty string. If this were a real application, our backend server team would provide the needed action URL. They may also provide the exact set of control names to use, so those names will match what the web server expects. For the method attribute, let's try get first. Looking at the controls, do we need to do anything else? If you said add the name attribute, you are correct. Each of the controls must have the name attribute set to include their values when the form is submitted. For the pet name, we'll set the name attribute to pet-name. We already have names for the radio buttons and values to assign based on the user's selection. For our select, we'll set the name attribute to pet-breed. We already have the value attribute set on these as well. Scrolling down, for this input element, we'll set the name to pet-adoption-date, this one to pet-age, and this one to pet-backstory. For the owner's email, we'll set the name to owner-email. Lastly, we set the checkbox name to add-to-mailing-list. Notice that we don't have a value to assign when the user checks the box. If we don't set a value, by default the value is set to on. Let's instead set a value of true. The button doesn't submit any additional data, so we don't add a name attribute. Notice that I've given the ID and name attributes different names. Some developers like to make them the same. I've given them a different ID and name so we can better see which are used where. And what about validation? Is there any particular validation we want? Since we define the owner's email as an email input element, the browser will automatically validate it as an email. We expect our users to locate their pets by name, so let's make the pet's name input required by adding the required attribute. Now we are ready to try it out. In the browser, let's start by clicking the Save button. The first thing the browser does is validate. We mark the first field as required, so we see a validation error message, and the form is not submitted. Let's enter a name. I'll put in Maki. I'll select dog. For the breed, I'll pick Corgi. Since these controls aren't required, I'll jump down to the email. I'll type in some gibberish and click Save. The message is letting us know that the email we entered isn't in a correct email format. I'll fix that with a fictitious email. Then I'll enter a short backstory. Check the Add Me to Your Mailing List and click Save. This time our submit was successful. Let's maximize the browser. Notice the URL. I'll copy the data and paste it into Notepad so we can see it better. After the URL is a question mark, then our data. Each data element is expressed as a name and value pair. The name attribute on our first element was pet-name. The value I entered was Maki. An ampersand. The pet type, I selected dog, an ampersand, and so on. Notice that the spaces in the backstory were encoded to plus signs, and the owner's email has some odd characters. The %40 represents the @sign. Note that we are not actually submitting this data anywhere, so it's not being saved. Let's use another feature of the browser's developer tools and watch the submit in action. Open the developer tools using F12 or on Chrome from the browser's menu, More Tools, Developer Tools, or on Safari from the Develop menu. Click the Network tab to watch the HTTP requests. Navigate to Home and back to clear the URL. In the Developer Tools, click the Clear button to clear the entries. Again, type in some of the data. Then click Save, and notice the HTTP request appears. Here it shows the query string with the appended name and value pairs. Next, let's go back to the editor and change the method from GET to POST. Back in the browser, navigate to Home and back to clear the URL. And in the Developer Tools, click to clear the entries. Then enter the name, type, backstory, and email, and click Save. The submission is not successful because we can't post to an empty URL, but we can see what it tried to send. First, notice that the URL does not contain any of our data. Rather, the data is part of the HTTP request payload. Click on pet-create.html and Payload. Here we see each of the input element names and their user-entered values. Click View URL Encoded to see the encoded values. So the key difference between a GET and a POST is that GET appends the name and value pairs to the URL. The POST sends the form data as part of the request body. Let's close the Developer Tools, click the Back button in the browser, and in VS Code, change the method back to GET. Looking back at the browser, we have now completed our first website. Yay! Our home page introduces the site. We created a table with links to showcase our pets. The user can click a pet to view their detail, or create a custom pet, even though we can't currently save it. We've come a long way since the beginning of this course. How do you feel? Now let's finish up this course with some final words and next steps.